Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Inquirer Live, Game Day Central, presented by Xfinity. Tonight, we are coming to you live from South Philadelphia, the press box at Lincoln Financial Field. In just a little bit, down on the field, the Eagles will host the Commanders in a Week 10 Monday Night Football matchup. I'm Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Josh Tolentino, and as always, I'm joined by my co host and fellow beat reporter, EJ Smith. EJ, how is it going?
It's going pretty good, Josh. I'm trying to stay warm. We have a little bit of change in the weather the last couple of days, but yeah, overall, no complaints. I'm excited for the show and excited for the game.
Yes, it is a very anticipated NFC East game. The Eagles are still undefeated. Tonight is actually Devontae Smith's 24th birthday, the Eagles wide receiver. So a lot going on here. The return of Carson Wentz, who will not be playing, but he is present here in Philadelphia. So tons to talk about. But EJ, before we get started, I want to remind all our viewers back home, where is the best place that they can continue the conversation with us?
Yeah, Josh, that's inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. That's where we kind of like to have a two-way conversation with you guys. You can go over there, you can watch the show from there, and then as the game progresses, we're going to be putting our analysis in there. We're going to be kind of giving you whatever takeaways we have in real time. And like I said, it can be a two-way conversation. You guys can tell us what you think, and we even take some of those questions in a segment that we'll do later on. It's our favorite segment, honestly. It's called What You Said. So yeah, definitely head over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day so we can have that chat.
All right, EJ, now that you've reminded everyone where they can continue the conversation, let's jump right into it, man. The Eagles, they are 8-0. They're in the middle of a or a 6 game stretch, EJ, where they've got 4 primetime games. In a couple weeks, they'll be hosting Sunday Night Football. The last game, it was Thursday Night Football. Tonight, though, it is Monday night, and the Eagles are still undefeated. EJ, it seems like I'm asking you this question every week, but how have the Eagles gotten to this point? They're the only undefeated team in the NFL, and it's been about that way for almost a month now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things have broken well for them. Obviously, some people want to talk about the schedule. They've played a couple of teams that, are pretty good teams. Obviously, that Minnesota Vikings win is looking a lot different as you kind of see the season progress. I think the Jacksonville win was a good one. So, there's obviously been a couple of games that, maybe the schedule's been a little favorable, but they've still beaten some good teams. And, Jalen Hurts is playing at an incredibly high level, taking care of the football. I think the turnover differential is a big part of it. The defense has been opportunistic with takeaways. The secondary's been playing out of their minds. And the pass rush has been a lot more productive than it was last year. Whenever you're 8-0, it's never just one thing. There's a lot of things that kind of broke well for this team in the first half of the season. And now, what's interesting is, like, as you said, there are going to be a lot of big stages. There's going to be a lot of, tougher opponents coming up. And every week you can sort of take something away. You can file something away and say, okay, we learned that about this team in this matchup. And, tonight's another example of that. So, yeah, I mean, obviously they started the way they wanted to, but now they're kind of getting into that final stretch of the year, that second half of the year where it's starting to get cold and, you're starting to play some better teams and playoff seeding is going to be on the line. The stakes go up higher. So, yeah, I'm excited for the second half for sure.
On Saturday, I was chatting with Dallas Goddard, the tight end, at his locker, EJ, and I had kind of asked him along the lines of, do you feel like every opposing team from now on is going to give you their best shot? And he kind of phrased it in a way that his response that, this is the NFL. He'd be surprised if any team came into a stadium and, not wanting to give their best shot. But obviously, the Eagles cannot ignore the fact that teams are going to be amplified in wanting to exert, so much effort in trying to ruin, this perfect season that they're having. But as we've learned, Nick Sirianni, that 1-0 mantra every week, especially with Jalen Hurts, their quarterback, that's been instilled all throughout the room. EJ, I ask you every week about, how have they gotten to this point, or which player has stood out to you the most? We've discussed a lot of A.J. Brown, a lot of Jalen Hurts. How about kind of an X factor to this point of the season? Who's kind of been that position group player for you, EJ? For me, there's been a lot of good play, good performance from the linebackers, T.J. Edwards and Kaiser White. How about you? Who do you think's kind of been overlooked but has been giving good production thus far with the team holding a perfect record?
Yeah, I think it's James Bradbury. That's a guy that, the number two cornerback spot, opposite Darius Slay. They had Steve Nelson in that role last year, and Steve Nelson was playing all right, but I think you really have seen what having two like elite, man coverage, zone coverage corners, guys who can do both, guys who can make plays on the ball, guys who kind of fit the scheme, and you've seen what that talent has afforded Jonathan Gannon as far as flexibility, being able to call man coverage on third downs, pivotal moments of the game. Um, Obviously, if we're talking position groups, like C.J. Gardner Johnson's a part of that too. Marcus Epps is a part of that. The secondary has been more versatile. They've made more plays on the ball. That's kind of the thing with this Jonathan Gannon defense. It's like, well, we're going to try and force you to go 8, 10, 12 plays down the field, and you're bound to make a mistake. And last year, it's like, well, if you don't have playmakers, you're not going to force teams to make mistakes. It's going to be easy for them. They're going to cut right through you. This year, you're seeing what that defense is kind of about, where it's like we're going to see, guys, like you said, Kaiser White and T.J. Edwards making plays on the ball. We're going to see Chauncey Gardner Johnson being in the right position. And, the ball's been finding him. He leads the NFL in interceptions. James Bradbury and Darius Slay, we're going to see them make plays on the ball. And we're going to see them lock up receivers. So, yeah, I think Bradbury, his personality kind of lends into being a little bit under the radar. It seems like he kind of likes that a little bit. But, yeah, we'll give him a little spotlight here. He's been playing really well.
I'm going to share part of a conversation that you and I had walking to the locker room the other day, EJ, and you had mentioned it. Kind of made me do a double take and think about it. But you said something along the lines of James Bradbury. He's on this 1-year deal. He might reset the cornerback market, or he's certainly raising his price each week. I mean, it's just been such a great fit here, as you mentioned, his tendencies, his talent, playing both in man and zone coverages. I'm going to have to agree with you on there. I mean, his bag, it keeps getting bigger every week as he works his way towards another contract, free agency here coming up soon at the end of the season. EJ, back to tonight's game. It was supposed to be the return of Carson Wentz, the former Eagles quarterback. Unfortunately for Eagles fans, unfortunately for Wentz, he is on injured reserve, I believe, with a broken finger, so he will not be playing tonight. Starting for the Washington Commanders will be Taylor Heineke. The Eagles have seen him previously, even though Carson Wentz started the game in Week 3. Heineke obviously had played here in Philadelphia last season. EJ, do you want to talk Heineke? Do you want to talk the disappointment of Eagles fans with Wentz? There was going to be, what we expected to be a hostile environment tonight.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to wait. Maybe next year, maybe somewhere else. I don't know what the future holds for Carson, but yeah, it'll be Heineke tonight. I think that there was a little bit of a misconception about Heineke. People were saying, well, maybe he gets the ball out quicker. Maybe, he's not as susceptible to sacks. Now, his playing style is not the same as Carson's. Carson will kind of be a statue in the pocket and hold on to the ball a couple ticks longer than, maybe he should and invite that pressure. Heineke is, a little bit more adept to creating, getting outside of the pocket, extending plays. But Heineke's got a really long time to throw. That's kind of surprised me. It made me do a double take when I was looking at the next gen stats about like as I was preparing for the game. Heineke is like over 3 seconds for time to throw, one of the longest times in the league through his couple starts here. So I do think there will be opportunities for the Eagles pass rush to kind of get after Heineke. They're going to have to be a little bit maybe more disciplined in their rush lanes because this is a guy who is kind of like a creator. He can kind of get out and extend plays. But yeah, I do think that there will be some opportunities for pressure against this guy as well.
The Eagles combined for 9 sacks, a season high, the last time these two teams met. Taylor Heineke, though, as we discuss the changes there at quarterback for the Commanders, EJ Heineke has committed a turnover, at least one turnover in all of his starts this season. The Eagles obviously lead the league in that category. There will be opportunities here for ball hawks such as C.J. Gardner Johnson to make some plays. Lastly, is our colleague Mike Sealski says hello here on Game Day Central. EJ, Devontae Smith, the last time these two teams met, he had a season high 169 yards. He made so many downfield, amazing, just jaw-dropping type catches, kind of similar to what he had shown as the Heisman winner at Alabama. It just felt like any time Jalen Hurts was throwing the ball his way, Devontae Smith was making a play. Tonight he turns 24. Do you expect another big game from number 6?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just thinking, some of those catches against Washington reminded me of the game last year against Denver, which was his 23rd birthday. So yeah, he just seems to have a tendency to show out on his birthday, and yeah, I mean, we've seen him make some crazy catches this year. Yeah, it's really been interesting to watch his ascension to the league and what he's been able to do. A lot of people talked about him being undersized. A lot of people said, "Oh, is he just a route runner?" I mean, I think he's proven by now he can go up and win contested catches. He's tougher. He's tough in the run game. He can block better than you would think he could at that size. He's definitely a more complete receiver than I think a lot of people expected him to be. And those catches are really at the forefront of what I think about when I think about what kind of receiver he is. So yeah, I mean, I could see him having a big game tonight.
Yeah, I spoke to Devontae the Tuesday coming in after the mini buy, and we kind of spoke. We discussed what has been happening in the offense. Obviously, there's been a lot of focus and attention on AJ Brown, Dallas Goddard. Both of them are first and second in receiving yards, with Devontae there at third. He doesn't seem to be, he doesn't mind the, the attention going towards those two other guys. This team is winning, and he knows that, as he phrased to me, that his games will come. Maybe tonight will be one of them.
Yeah, and as I'm looking out on the field, I see the salute to service, emblem or the writing in the end zone. I see some army colors or some military colors from some hoodies on the field. I think it'd be a good opportunity for us to kind of plug something for you, Josh. You gave me the shameless plug last week. I'll give it to you this week. You had a great story in Confluence with Veterans Day.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, leading into the Texans game, EJ, I spent some time with N'Kobe Dean, the rookie linebacker from Georgia. He was a first round prospect who slipped to the Eagles in the third round. And N'Kobe, he has such a great story, EJ. I learned through speaking with him, through his mother, Niketa, through other members of his family. First, both of his parents served in the Army, EJ. So, I learned kind of about his upbringing, and really, the biggest observation that you and I have had in interacting with N'Kobe since he's been here in Philadelphia, he seems to always be smiling, and nearly every conversation, it doesn't matter what the topic of discussion is, but he's always a yes sir, yes ma'am, always showing respect. We're not that much difference in age from him, and he continues to show respect in every conversation. So I just wanted to learn a little bit more about N'Kobe's background, and it starts right there with his parents being in that Army background. He spent a lot of time around veterans growing up, a lot of trips to the VA facility, the Veterans Affairs facility down in Mississippi. And it was there kind of how just N'Kobe grew up, wanting to always pay back to veterans. And not just that, he's doing a tremendous amount of work, especially for a rookie, EJ. A lot of guys, as we cover them, they will do community service through the team, but not much extra on their own efforts. But N'Kobe, even though he's a rookie, he's doing so much here with the community. He's visiting schools. And this specific project that he told me about, that we talked about, was this health project, and making sure students around the Philadelphia area get the proper care that they need. So, just a great time there with N'Kobe, as he paid back to veterans and is doing a lot of community service here in the Philadelphia area.
Yeah, no, this was a great look at just kind of how N'Kobe, what makes N'Kobe N'Kobe, and that's a guy that he might not be playing a ton on the defense this year, but he's definitely got a bright future, and he's a guy who I expect Eagles fans to see a lot of over the course of maybe not this season, but over the course of the next few years.
Yeah, he didn't want to talk too much about his lack of playing time. He certainly seems he's shown patience in the public eye, but you can tell that he wants to be out there.
Yeah.
TJ Edwards, Kaiser White, we mentioned them earlier. They're playing at such a high level together. Maybe we'll see N'Kobe more on the field um, over these next couple games with Jordan Davis out, his teammate from Georgia. But overall, it was a discussion I had with TJ Edwards. He says that N'Kobe Dean is ready. He told you, EJ, or Jonathan Gannon rather, that N'Kobe is ready. So when his time comes, he's saying that he'll be ready. In the meantime, he's doing all these off the field community service efforts. Again, that was highlighted in that story. You can check it out at Inquirer.com. EJ, it is time to transition over to who's hurt, who's healthy. There's some breaking news just before we arrived. The team placed Avante Maddox, the starting slot cornerback, on injured reserve. He will miss the next 4 games at minimum. He'll be eligible to return, I believe, around week 14. EJ, that's kind of a big loss for these Eagles. He had missed a couple games previously earlier in the season. Now he heads to IR with a hamstring injury. How can the Eagles adapt moving forward at the slot?
Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier about how much flexibility the secondary had to kind of play different calls and execute, different things. Avante was a big part of that, being able to match up with guys in the slot. Even though he's a smaller guy, he can still cover big tight ends in the slot, big receivers in the slot. So yeah, it definitely is a big loss. And the way that they'll probably initially address it is with Josiah Scott. He dealt with his own ankle injury this week. He was limited in practice, but he was cleared by the time Friday or by the time Saturday came around. Excuse me, I'm a day behind because of the Monday night. But yeah, so Josiah Scott will probably replace him in the slot to start. They have options though. If let's say Josiah Scott's ankle's banged up, or if he struggles. I am still curious to see if they'd ever want to put C.J. Gardner Johnson in the slot. If they have more confidence in maybe Kayvon Wallace stepping into that safety spot. C.J. Gardner Johnson has a lot of experience playing in the slot. That's what he did in New Orleans. He's a guy who's capable of covering, uh, you know, big slot tight ends, big slot receivers, whatever it might be. So yeah, I think that they do have some flexibility in the secondary. They really prioritize versatility when they were addressing. The needs in the secondary, so they have a couple guys who can fill that spot. But I mean, Josiah Scott played reasonably well when he played in the slot. The 2 games where Avante Maddox was missing with an ankle injury. So yeah, I think he'll be the starting. He'll be the first option in that position.
Just a couple other notes following Avante Maddox to IR. On injured reserve, EJ, he joins Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis is eligible to return in week 13. It's worth noting that we saw Jordan Davis in the locker room throughout the week. He wasn't on the field or working out in front of us, but we were able to see him. I interacted with him. I had a short conversation with him the other day. He said he's feeling good, chomping at the bit to want to come back. There wasn't any noticeable swelling on that high ankle sprain, which is a good news for Jordan Davis and the Eagles. In addition to Avante Maddox moving to IR, Josh Jobe, another cornerback rookie from Alabama, he is also out with a hamstring injury. In turn, with Maddox and Jobe being out, Mario Goodridge has been elevated from the practice squad. We will see exactly how the defense and secondary adjust, EJ. Let's transition over into what you said. You mentioned it earlier. This is one of our favorite segments. A reminder that you can submit your comments and questions throughout the week at inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. Next week, we might have a chance to read them on the show. Our first question or comment comes from Bad Love, who says, it's an NFC East battle. Washington D line, Heineke, a much better quarterback than Wentz. Everybody is gunning for the undefeated team. This is going to be a tougher game than many think. EJ, I don't want your prediction quite yet, but what are your expectations for NFC East matchup? These division matchups always seem to be a little bit tighter, especially the second time around.
Yeah, it kind of surprises me that we're at the 19-minute mark of the show and we haven't talked about Washington's defensive front. I think Bad Love's got it perfectly. I think he encapsulates it perfectly with that matchup. I think that this Washington front is one of the most talented in the league. The Eagles' offensive linemen were asked about them all week, and they all kind of agreed like this is one of the better fronts, or if not the best front we'll play all year. Whether it's Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne on the interior, you got Montez Sweat on the edge. They did not. Washington did not elevate Chase Young as a lot of people kind of expected. He seems like he's been, ramping up from that ACL injury he suffered exactly 365 days ago. Beat writer tidbit. I looked that up earlier in the week. But they still have a lot of talent up front. There's a lot of guys up there that can disrupt the game. I mean, a lot of Eagles fans will remember the week 3 matchup, the Eagles didn't really have a lot of success running the ball. And because of that, they couldn't really put the game away in the second half. It felt like Washington was just kind of hanging around. And it was just kind of like one of those it was back when we were really worried about the second half scoring production from the Eagles. And a big part of that was, they tried to sit on the ball in the third quarter. And Washington's run defense is so good that it's tough to do that. This Washington front leads the league in quarterback knockdown percentage. They're kind of middle of the pack with sacks, but honestly, that might not be a good thing because when you look at a team that's knocking the quarterback down a lot, getting a lot of pressures, if they're not getting sacks, it means that they're kind of due for some sacks. So obviously the Eagles have a great offensive line. They got healthy. The offensive line was kind of banged up going into the bye week, and they're a lot healthier now. But I mean, this will still be a really important matchup, especially in the interior positions. Landon Dickerson, Isaac Sayamalo, Jason Kelsey against Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne. That's where my eyes will be for most of the time when the Eagles offense is on the field.
We've seen Jalen Hurts produce so much from the pocket over these past several games. Who knows? Maybe tonight he'll have some running around, as you mentioned, a stout defensive front there for the Commanders. Our next comment comes from Jersey Mark, who says Jalen Hurts has not peaked yet. Still learning and working. EJ, kind of as we consume our own news throughout the week, we see that Jalen Hurts is getting discussed at a much higher rate nationally. He's being discussed amongst the top tier of quarterbacks. We've got to remember, I mean, he's still 24. I mean, this is still year three. He's eligible for an extension next year, obviously, but he just continues to prove. It seems so much on a weekly basis during this regular season.
Yeah, this is something that we've heard. I think at least I think we've both probably heard from people inside the Eagles building. Like whatever his potential is, he's going to reach it. The work ethic that he has, the amount of time he puts into the game. He is the type of guy that will reach that potential. So yeah, I mean, I think that Jersey Mark has got it right again. I think that our commenters are dead on today for sure. I think that he's the type of guy that he's talked about being a triple threat, being able to beat defenses with his mind, with his arm, and with his legs. I think that has kind of been evident this year with the way that the amount of decisions that the Eagles ask him to make every play, whether it's RPOs or RPRs, where it's run pass run, and even just in traditional passing game, he's been effective in all of them, and I think that this is kind of the next step for him. And you're right, he's 24. It would stand to reason that he will continue to improve as a decision maker, as a processor. The more he sees it, that's something Nick Sirianni talks about all the time. The more that he sees, different coverages, different looks, the more comfortable he's going to get, pulling the trigger on those things. And he's been really effective at it this year. So I do think that we could see him continue to take those next steps. I do think this probably isn't his final form.
Our last comment comes from Big Left Fist, who says the Eagles have 2 first-round picks. Needs massive tackle to replace Lane Johnson and then a stud safety. The obsession with edge rushers is going to be overboard at this point. EJ, we're so consumed with what is going on right now in the season. The team is obviously undefeated. There is a lot of attention on these Eagles. We've also got to remember that they've got 2 first-round picks. They own the Saints pick, which is looking better and better by the week. I believe at this point, if the draft were to be right now, I think that Saints pick is a top 5 pick. That's pretty significant as we look ahead to the future.
Yeah, and you can count me as one of the people that's obsessed with edge rusher. If you're drafting in the top 5, especially the way this class is shaping up, maybe it's not an edge rusher, maybe it's just an interior guy. Jalen Carter from Georgia is one that sticks out to me. You got to get those guys, man. I mean, like it is just so much easier when you just have 4 absolute difference makers up front. And the Eagles are enjoying that right now with Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat, kind of flanking Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, and Jordan Davis when he was out there. Having those guys is really how a lot of teams win. And you look at the Super Bowl winning teams every year, they usually have good quarterbacks and they've got good pass rushes. So I agree, that safety will be a need. I agree that tackle, having somebody kind of waiting in the wings for Lane Johnson, the way that Jordan Mailata eventually became kind of the one that was the heir apparent to Jason Peters. Those are needs, but man, when you're drafting, top 5, top 4, top 3, you can get some really, really freakish edge rushers at that spot. And I think that that's one thing that the Eagles would have always valued. And if you look at the best teams, a lot of them have those. Myles Garrett, Chase Young. The list is really long. Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Von Miller. You need one of those guys when the weather gets really cold and you're starting to play in those playoff games. So, you can count me as one of those edge rusher obsessed people for sure.
Certainly, as the Eagles continue to move forward at trying to maintain their perfect record, always worth remembering that they've got those 2 first-round picks right now. One of them is a top 5 pick from New Orleans. EJ, it is time for predictions, but just before we move on to that, let's go on to some thoughts from fellow Inquirer beat reporter Jeff McClain.
Hi, I'm Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer, here to talk a little bit more about the Eagles' matchup against the Washington Commanders on Monday night. It's been a while since they've last played, winning in Houston 10 days ago, and before that, they played the Steelers and won there, but over the last month, really only 2 games for this team, so there's always a chance that the Eagles may come out a little slow. That being said, it should be energetic down there at the Link. This team hasn't really slipped up at all through the first 8 games of the season, and there's another strong chance that they'll go 9-0 against the Washington squad that has struggled. They've gotten a little bit of a bump with quarterback, Taylor Heinicke in for Carson Wentz. He's really done a better job of getting the ball to their top receivers, Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel. And the biggest addition that they may have is having Jahan Dotson back in the slot. To me, Dotson is one of the key matchups for this Eagles team because they're going to be without their slot cornerback, Avonte Maddox. And the last time they were without Maddox against the Jaguars, Josiah Scott, who's going to replace him again, struggled early in that game. Now, Jonathan Gannon should be able to do a few things to cover for slot, but that leaves you a little lighter on the outside. That being said, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, they've done an excellent job at both those outside cornerback spots. And in the first meeting, did a pretty good job of keeping McLaurin in check. The big part of that defensive performance in that first game, of course, was getting after Carson Wentz with that defensive front. They sacked him 9 times, an amazing 9 times. And I'm not sure if we're going to see that again. Not having Wentz in there is a big reason why you probably won't see that again. We all know how much he likes to hold the ball to his own detriment. Heinicke probably doesn't have the skill set that Wentz does. He may not have the ability to throw down the field the way he does, but he does give him a little bit of versatility in that offense. And the Eagles last year, while they did beat Heinicke when he was in quarterback, they struggled a few times in certain stretches in that game. On the other side of the ball, the Eagles offense has to always worry about that defensive front. You got Jonathan Allen, you got Montez Sweat, and you got Daron Payne. There was a chance that Chase Young, who injured his ACL a year ago, would be back in this game, but he's deemed out. He won't be activated, so the Eagles don't have to worry about him. But still, those 3 guys are a handful. Certainly in the interior, Jonathan Allen should give Jason Kelsey, Isaac Seumalo, and Landon Dickerson all that they can handle. Montez Sweat was kept in check by Lane Johnson that first matchup, but he's dangerous. He's got a bunch of pressures this year, and the Eagles have to be careful about not letting him get to Jalen Hurts, who for the most part has done a very good job of avoiding pressure. But really, this offense has been nothing that's been slowing it down. They can run it, they can pass it. I feel like, again, you're just going to see this unit clicking. Could they have a potential setback? Could they overlook Washington? In theory, yes, that's always a possibility week in and week out in the NFL. But I still think this team has a lot going for it against Washington. I don't think the greater test will come until a few weeks down the line. So I'm picking again an Eagles victory. I think I have a 27-17. That doesn't quite cover the 11-point spread, but it's certainly a comfortable enough victory in the NFL for this Eagles team. Okay, guys, back to you.
Thank you, Jeff McClain, for your thoughts on tonight's game. EJ, time to get your thoughts. I always ask you every week a player to watch out for. I'm going to jump ahead of you and claim Devontae Smith on his 24th birthday. I think, they get him involved tonight after a few quiet weeks and, maybe celebrating in the end zone. Who is your player to watch out for?
Yeah, I probably would have went Devontae, honestly. I remember from the first Washington game that Washington struggled with slot receivers. Give me AJ Brown. Maybe he gets some time in the slot and really takes advantage of, kind of how Washington plays those receivers. But yeah, no, I had 24-14 in the Inquirer I guess it was today or whenever it was. I kind of agree with Jeff on a lot of these things. I think that Washington's defensive line is going to keep this from being out of hand or a blowout. Even if the Eagles get out to an early lead, I don't necessarily foresee them being able to just put up crazy points by running the ball in the second half. So I think Washington will hang around, but I do think that the Eagles are just the better team here. I think we saw it in the first matchup. And I think the Eagles are a better team now than they were even in that first matchup. Now, obviously, Washington's a little hot right now. They're playing well, but even some of those games, you look at who they were against and, sort of the circumstances surrounding it. I think that the Eagles should be able to handle business here tonight.
It's always getting closer to kickoff, EJ, when both teams are out there and the fireworks are going off. Some fireworks just popped off. In today's edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer, I believe I had the Eagles winning by two possessions, just seeing what happened after last game. Again, I picked Devontae Smith to have a big game. The Commanders secondary struggled to contain him the last time we were in Washington, expecting a similar output as they try to get Devontae Smith more involved in tonight's game. And then again, the Eagles by a couple touchdowns. These division games are always more competitive. We'll see what happens tonight. EJ, it is time to wrap up. I want to thank everyone so much for tuning into another edition of Inquire Live at Game Day Central, presented by Xfinity. Make sure you stick around at inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. You'll be able to interact with all of us, myself, EJ, Jeff, and then our columnists, Mike Sealski and Marcus Hayes. We are all here at Lincoln Financial Field, ready to watch these undefeated Eagles host the Washington Commanders in Week 10. Who knows? During our next show, it's only going to be in a few days, EJ. We're going to be traveling over to Indianapolis. During our next show, we'll have a chance to read your comments during that section called What You Say. For EJ Smith, I am Josh Tolentino. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Game Day Central. We will see you over there on Game Day Central, Inquirer.com.